Last year I went to the first Pride parade in my city since the plague had started. Through bad circumstances, this was the first time I ever actually went since I came out. I expected to feel free and finally among people like me, but as I arrived, there were just groups everywhere. Nobody alone like me. Pride flags were everywhere, but barely any bisexual pride flag. I felt like an imposter. What if they saw I was bisexual? What if they knew I desired not just those poor women and NBs, but also these tainted, evil men? What if they knew that I wrote and drew not solely women, but everybody else too? Slash and male/female, not just femme slash as these fans online had said a good woman-loving woman would solely do. Everything else would be anti-feminist. I hadn't, despite trying so hard to find somebody, slept with a woman yet, and this only made it worse. I wasn't gay enough. Everybody could be someone who harassed me online about my vanished choices. There was no way of knowing. I did not feel safe anymore. I had to leave. On the way back home, I almost swore to myself that I would have to suppress my desire for women now because I would never fit into queer spaces. Because I had heard so often that I, as a bisexual woman, do not belong, and nearly all of it was in fandom. I'm Telly's greatest fan, a bisexual and autistic fan artist and writer. Today's topic I wanted to do since quite a long time, but life was exhausting. You know how it is, and stuff. There's a massive biphobia in the She-Ra fandom, but also in other fandoms. Fans of She-Ra brought it into Arcane, the Owl House, and Amphibia, and the Marvel Loki series has Biphobes on their own. I think they are unrelated, but I'm not sure. I haven't done a study or something on it, so whatever. And this is also not something new, because in the Steven Universe fandom, this was already an issue. For example, you couldn't headcanon Pearl or other gems as bisexual, despite them never clearly stating that they were lesbians, only that they were attracted to women. Let's get started. And before this disclaimer, if I speak about toxic or biphobic lesbians, I mean just them. I know that most lesbians are decent people, just with this loud subset giving all of them a bad name. Same thing, and this will surely get me death threats because they just have no media literacy. Catradora stands who harass other people. Shipping a messy ship does not automatically make you a bad person, but attacking and abusing real-life people surely does. What we see here is a prime tactic of toxic lesbians. They make bisexuals just existing an attack on themselves, and so claim bisexuals do not exist, and saying that they exist is lesbophobic. They also use the concept of compet to deny existence of bisexual women. This is also a typical TERF tactic, though most of these people don't identify as TERFs, but still adopt their rhetoric. Bisexual women existing threatening lesbians is not a new phenomenon. For example, there was an incident in 1989 where bisexuals wanted to be included in a pride parade march in a small town in Massachusetts, with intense backlash from a subset of toxic lesbians. And these people had familiar arguments that often crop up in fandom to these days. For example, that bisexuals have a lack of commitment to lesbianism, that bisexuals erase lesbians, and that they are an attack on the purest form of feminism, lesbianism. Compat is also only a useful concept in this form if there is no actual attraction to men. But fandom biphobes make everything about themselves, and because they have no attraction to men, nobody can have. But bisexual women have attraction to men. So compat only is an ideal tool to try to gaslight them into thinking it is not real, but can only be a product of patriarchy. Funny how someone with LGBT in name tries to erase a queer autistic woman's sexuality. On that note, this person is also a massive bigot and harasser otherwise, but this is not part of the video. Again, this is this person putting the own identity over those of bisexual people, both in the sense that discomfort over a bisexual character is more important than their bisexual identity, and that also that being a lesbian is somehow queerer than being bisexual. Fandom biphobes try to erase Entrapta's bisexuality especially much, and this is also something I talked about in the ableism in fandom video. It's interesting how desperately trying to make a love between a queer autistic woman and a heavily implied queer man straight and in their worldview immoral with that. Perhaps they are trying to justify their disgust at disabled people's sexuality, and they definitely are also trying to justify harassment of fans. Maybe these kind of fans also try to make Entrapta more like them, because her being so different from them makes them uncomfortable. But unlike Hordak, she's a woman, and so she has to be pure and has to be saved. This ranking doesn't make sense at first. Glimmer and Bo are on the same level of visibly being queer as Entrapta and Hordak. And also, how is an unhealthy, abusive relationship more queer than a friends to lovers relationship? But if you look at it through the idea of queer being the same as morally good and shipping being moral, then it makes sense. These people ship Catradora, so it has to be morally good, and that means queer, for them. Glimbo complements Catradora well as a side ship, so it has to be good, read queer too. On the contrast, they feel threatened by how strange Entrapta is. They can't relate to Hordak because he's a disabled man, so there is no understanding of his arc, and he is just evil to them. So of course they have to be straight, even though they are a very subversive ship in their gender roles and even clothing. And well, Glimmerdora, it's the rival ship to Catradora, so it has to be evil, read straight too, even if it's between two women. So if someone is morally bad according to them, read they don't understand them or dislike them for whatever reason, they can't be queer. This is a dangerous idea because it erases, coupled with shipping is morality, the identity of real living fans for the crime of shipping the wrong ship. It goes like this. Entrapta shippers and Glimmerdora shippers are seen as straight. Straight people are evil, so it's okay to abuse them. Even though there are proofs on the contrary about the queerness of these types of shippers. And also it is not okay to harass even cishet people. This particular post shows well how the erasure of queer identities and calling queer people X-phobic is used to silence criticism, different opinions, or even defense from harassment. Garnet's Fists, who used to be Saphir Murders, uses this tactic quite often. and they are a well-known bully, a harasser of everybody, criticizing or even just pointing out not so pretty parts of canon of Catradora, even if it's deliberately hidden and tagged as such criticism, so they could have avoided this. They also suicide bait, they love to gaslight their victims, and they use ableist slurs and a few times even faked callouts. Their thought process in this is everybody disagreeing with me is a bad person, so they can't be my good identity or have faced any oppression, so they must be privileged, and so it's okay to abuse / send death threats / suicide bait them. It's a typical case of in-group and out-group. Those kinds of toxic Catradora shippers are incapable of seeing flaws in themselves, think queer people must be a monolith, so all queer people are without flaws. And this in turn means anyone criticizing their abusive behavior or even just Catra's abusive behavior can't be queer. They also try to make themselves the victim and use strong words so people have strong emotions and do not think about what they are actually saying. A small detail aside from the screenshot, the OP did not defend Raylo, they just pointed out similarities to Catradora. But well, male/female ships have to be evil, right? Sometimes it still makes me feel like a bad sapphic for not shipping what this toxic lesbians ship. I know it's bullshit rationally, but reading it so often, well, a part of me just starts to believe it. This kind of thinking makes queer identity about good ships and bad ships instead of actual queerness. It also shows this idea that queer women can never be abusive or harm people, no matter how disgusting they behave, both in fiction and in reality. And obviously this is quite dangerous, as there are indeed cases of domestic abuse between two women. Police like Garnet's Fist use this idea to their advantage, to not be called out on their abuse. To think that women are inherently good and innocent and men are inherently evil, and that being a lesbian is morally the best form of existence is turf ideology. This is one of many biphobic Anon asks. This blog that criticizes toxic Catradora shippers and flaws of the ship itself gets. It's a fallacy that bisexuals are accepted by cisheads, because cisheads still know that bisexuals are attracted to the same sex and oppress them for that. But we are also not welcome with toxic lesbians because they want to ostracize us for being attracted to different genders. We are not welcome anywhere, not safe anywhere. I can talk to most cisheads about my attraction to women and NBs, but I am also afraid of other queers being disgusted and seeing me as a traitor, unless they are bisexual or pansexual. This also reflects on the higher mental illness and suicide rates of bisexuals compared to gays, and they also have nearly the same compared to lesbians. Pansexuals had even higher rates than both gays and lesbians. Source, the Trevor Project, and I put the link in the description. These high mental illness rates stem from oppression, so this is proof that lesbians and bisexual women face the same amount of oppression. And while lesbians, unless they are part of another marginalized identity too, are generally accepted in the LGBT community, bisexual women are often not, as the entitled bigot from this ask shows. It also plays into this this idea of oppression Olympics, because for people like the bigot from the Anon, oppression is seen as a marker for being morally pure. Often it's even used to hide abusive or bigoted behavior, as this Ask and large parts of the toxic Shira fans show. 36% of films include lesbians, but only 14% include bisexuals. So lesbians have more representation. This is by Glad, and I also link in the description. It just feels very alienating to not just barely see yourself in media, but also don't really have a community you can feel safe in. And again, this is not a new phenomena. The toxic lesbians Sarah Duria and Liz Brooke sent a letter against inclusion of bisexuals to a pride parade already, and they already spoke of hetero privilege and that bi issues are different from gay and lesbian issues. It is not a privilege to hide, and this argument also does not make sense because a lesbian can also hide that she's a lesbian. This comment shows the idea that bi women are lesser gay than lesbians, and so lesser representation. Also, it shows the idea that bi women who are with men are no longer gay. I used to feel horrible and incomplete back when I not had sex with a woman yet. If you really believe in this idea, the worth of my identity only hinges on the person I have sex or a relationship with, which is pretty gross. I know that I am bi and that I like having sex with women now, but I still feel bad about still desiring men. And things like this are the reason. I faced more biphobia in fandom than I did in real life. The nerve to say that disabled bi people are not oppressed enough to deserve positivity. Especially with all the harassment, suicide baiting, and death threats we face, the biphobia and ableism specifically tailored to hurt us, not to mention the biphobia and ableism outside of fandom. Apart from this again shows the idea of bi people existing, taking away from the real creators. Also the idea of also again oppression as moral value. So in order to be morally wrong, Entrapta shippers, who are mostly queer and or disabled, have to not be oppressed. And it also repeats that bisexual women with men can't possibly be queer anymore. This person often whines about Entrapta shippers, queer people, disabled people, not being queer or oppressed enough and daring to want positivity, but they also happily participate in the fandom. Either actually support us or finally leave us alone. You can't have both, hypocrite. The sheer entitlement to decide who is oppressed enough. And I also never heard of positivity months being only there for the oh so pure real queers, same-sex couples, and neither has anybody I spoke to. The Goat Songs is friends with Garnet's Fists and an equally abusive online bully, and here they use the same tactics. Again, they have this belief that everybody fighting back against me or disagreeing with me is a lesbiphobe. They also use the TERF idea that men are so evil and fundamentally different to women that women could only find male characters interesting by being attracted to them, and also that this attraction is a character flaw. Actually, Catra and Kylo Ren are fairly similar, and how different they are treated shows these people's gendered standards. You know, Maybe women relate to male characters because they share traits or backstory or are a cult survivor too, or queer in this specific way, or also disabled and abused and a loner. Or in Kyle's case, because they have sympathy for abuse victims, what seems to be impossible for this person. I want to give this person the benefit of a doubt. Maybe they are just themselves a lesbian who likes Entrapta but not headcanoning her as a lesbian. But people desperately try to erase Entrapta's bisexuality and make her a lesbian. I had to stop shipping Scortrapta because shippers would constantly be biphobic and claim Entrapta as a lesbian. No, she is not better rep like this. She is already queer enough how she is. And also, someone being queer is not the only way someone can be representation, because there are other forms of marginalized identities outside of that, and fandom loves to forget this. There is an element of purity in their rhetoric. They want to clean tainted bisexual Entrapta from her sinful, gross attraction to evil men like, insert ableist slur here, Hordak, which is basically fundamentalist Christian rhetoric but with genders switched. What first comes to mind in this post is the idea that only morally pure people can be queer. Read people that they can relate to because they are like them. Entrapta and Hordak need to be straight so that harassment of their fans is justified. Disabled people don't fit into these people's idea of queerness, so they can't be queer. Only the cool kids can be queer, aka be part of the in-group. The mocking of the out-group, like certain members of Shira crew love to do too, is progressive now since they are uncool / not fit into their idea of queerness and so must be disgusting straights. Disability and ethnicity, sometimes also class and gender, make people perform queerness different to expectation. It's honestly pretty insidious to call true disabled queer people disgusting under the pretense of them not being cool enough. Sorry if you hear music in the background. My neighbors are listening very, very loudly to music and they do that quite often. But also the time I picked to record this is a relatively rare time where it's relatively quiet, so every other time would be even worse, so I just continue. Well, anyway, this belief that real queer people are only being allowed to like one specific kind of ship curiously coincides with the ship's toxic Catradora stance themselves like. Seems to be quite common in fandom. This post also shows misogyny towards all women who have anything but hate towards men, which is typical TERF rhetoric. It shows an eraser of queerness because said people are not performing queerness right. And here this is something as small as liking a ship these toxic lesbian dislikes. They narrow all interaction between men and women down to innocent women trying to save evil men, when in the series Entrapta is two evil people coming together and being mad scientists and falling in love over discovering how similar they are because of the oppression they faced. Also, Entrapta clearly is the person in charge in this. They also erase the ethnicity of fans of color because of oppression, being seen as a virtue, and people of the disliked ship can't be good people. And we again see an accusation of bigotry for disagreeing with them. Hear about if Catra ever did anything wrong in her life. She did. That she is a lesbian does not automatically make that impossible. But OP is a lesbian too, so she would have to admit that she possibly herself can have flaws. These kind of people know that Entrapta shippers are mostly queer, but mostly bisexual, pansexual, ace, and/or trans, which for them does not count as queer. And even if the crime of liking the wrong ship erases all of that, it puts this pressure on people to solely ship good ships. And I still remember, and maybe still to this day, feel and felt ashamed about not creating enough femslash, and forced myself to do it to be a good fan, a good women-loving woman, which took all the fun from it. In this kind of environment, your queerness only matters if you cater to these people and never disagree with them. They have to make themselves the victim, despite most of the harassment in the She-Ra fandom comes from people like this. According to them, the evil, impure straights and pure lesbians are so fundamentally different that it's impossible to compare or relate between them. They also show the turf idea that abuse between lesbians is impossible. They say that we can't be allowed to discuss flaws of queer media or creators, or we are homophobic. Also, notice how they write about males, like an incel or a turf usually does. This anon proves that for them, bisexuals do not count as queer. There is a smaller number of bisexual rap in general, but still they have to play the victim. They are offended by bisexuals' mere existence. And just like the other biphobic anon this person got, this contains the idea of bisexuals being not oppressed, which is objectively wrong. Indecisive is known for their constant harassment, mostly biphobia towards Glimbo and Entrapta. But they also made a whole hate essay on AO3 just for someone writing a character they like in a way they disliked. They love to infantilize Entrapta and attack Entrapta shippers, and generally being an ableist. I was not sure if I should include this because they clearly crave attention, and I did not want to give them that, but also they are a part of the bigotry in the She-Ra fandom. Again, this idea that bisexuals stop being bisexuals once they are in a relationship with someone of a different gender, as if queerphobic cisheads would accept them more than lesbians. I mean, just look at this posts in, I don't know, women's magazines, men's magazines, all kind of magazines, where someone writes, my girlfriend is bisexual, so now I am offended and I dumped her because I believe that she will cheat on me. The word bihet is also a turf dog whistle. Hiding isn't privilege. According to people like this, the only good bi-rep are women who exactly behave like lesbians, which in truth, translated down to the basics, means that bi women should not exist and bi men should not exist. There are many ways of being visibly bi other than suppressing your sexuality and pretending you are lesbian. Biphobes like this just refuse to look. For so long, I felt so broken for not being a lesbian, and bigots like this are the reason. I felt like desiring men makes me unclean. I thought I have to police my most personal fantasies. Sometimes I even now still think that. I can't fantasize about some hot people without a little voice saying, is this feminist enough? Are you a good sapphic and focus mostly on the woman? This issue obviously comes from society's general biphobia, but also in large parts from turf influences on fandom, even if most of these bigots do not seem to realize that. And it's also a fundamentalist Christian purity culture, but with activism words, a trend the anti-movement started. I am so done with catering to these people. I will never be enough for them anyway. It's impossible to fully suppress my bisexuality. I am bi and autistic, and that means that the only way I could possibly fully please these bigots is to not exist. They don't deserve to be catered to. And if you are this level of spoiled, not being catered to feels like oppression. I know it's hard to unlearn all this shit Ron hears and reads, but I try. I am still in the process of doing this, and I'm not finished at all. But something that was helpful for me was finding other bisexual people to support me, at best in real life. For example, I found a queer bar that is actually frequented by all kinds of queer people. Now I only create femme/art and fics if I actually want it. I'm not a bad feminist or bad woman-loving woman because of that. You can make feminist art that expresses you and even explore your bisexuality in so much more ways than just the very narrow idea of fandom police. Also, it's fandom, not activism. It does not always have to be that deep. Stay strong. You are queer enough exactly how you are.